And in the late 70s, as climate modelers were starting to become concerned about climate change issues, oceanographers said, oh, well, we have something to contribute to that because we know a lot about how the ocean will respond to global warming. So I started reading the scientific literature to understand the science, because as a sort of science, I usually start there. And when I did that, I realized that a couple of important things. First of all, that scientists have understood that global warming was going to happen for a long time. Second of all, that there was a consensus in the scientific community, that there was no question among climate scientists and oceanographers, atmospheric physicists, that global warming was in fact now happening. And three, that there was this enormous gap between the way my scientific colleagues were talking about it and the way it was being presented in the media. And that was really the crux of the story, that I started becoming interested in. Well, if scientists have been working on this since the 1950s, and if they've understood the basic parameters of the problem since late 70s, mid 80s, then why is the media presenting this as a raging debate?
That reflects the direction of Merchants of Doubt, how a handful of scientists obscured the truth on issues from tobacco smoke to global warming, spoken by the author Naomi Oreskes. One of the main topics discussed is tobacco smoke and its link to cancer. By the late 1970s, there had been plenty of lawsuits against tobacco companies related to cancer, but these huge businesses had used expert scientists to testify in court in their favor. Even though it had already been demonstrated that tar painted on mice caused fatal cancers by researchers in New York in the 50s, tobacco companies made it their goal to attempt to deceive the American public about the health effects of smoking. They wanted to convince the public that there was no sound scientific basis for the charges. Tobacco companies went about this by cherry-picking data and focusing on unexplained details, focusing on questions like why cancer rates vary between rural and urban areas and whether or not air pollution contributes to lung cancer creates doubt even if the answers are already known in the scientific community. When these loaded questions were posed to people in the media responded just how the big businesses wanted them to. When people looked at these questions, they were persuaded to think that there was still a lot of doubt surrounding the tobacco cancer link when there really wasn't any at all. They created the impression of controversy simply by asking questions. By the late 50s, the tobacco industry had made important ties to the medical industry and even had their hand in choosing members for the Advisory Committee on Smoking and Health. However, even with their hand-picked committee members, the committee's report did claim that smokers were 10 to 20 times more likely to get cancer than non-smokers. You would think that this would discourage the tobacco companies, but they only redoubled their efforts. Unfortunately, Congress didn't ban sales of tobacco, but it did require warning labels, which caused the number of Americans that smoke to go down by 37%. Despite the fact that the number of smokers had declined, industry profits were at an all-time high. Scientists like Martin J. Klein continued to be paid off by tobacco companies. When Klein was asked if the 3-pack-a-day habit, or if a 3-pack-a-day habit might be a contributory factor to the lung cancer of a 20-year smoker, Klein answered no, saying that you could not say that with certainty. I can envision many scenarios where smoking had nothing to do with it. When asked if tobacco companies funded his research, he admitted they supplied $3 million over 10 years as a gift. Doubt is crucial to science, but it also makes science vulnerable to misrepresentation because it is easy to take uncertainties out of context and create the impression that everything is unresolved. The tobacco industry found a way to create a sense of doubt based solely on normal scientific uncertainty.
Merchants of Doubt turns our attention from the effects of smoking to that of nuclear winter. The results of a nuclear war can ultimately result in a devastating nuclear winter, where the sun would be completely obscured for several months or even years, causing widespread crop failure and a drop in average temperature from 10 to 30 degrees. But some scientists, and others not directly related to science, would tell us not to worry. Scientists agree that smoking can be healthy. Okay, you wouldn't believe this now, but 20 years ago you might have. This is because we assume that information published by or drawn from scientific research must be accurate, and it should be. Unfortunately, there are many who would take advantage of our trust in science. Scientists with a reputation, scientists who have made a statement in the past, and scientists willing to go against their own personal morals often end up considered famous among the public. Radical claims are the ones people will remember and the ones that will forever stand out. But those with the time and knowledge to challenge these claims would ask the question, what was the basis for these claims? And would easily come to this conclusion, not much. Little evidence was cited, and when the available evidence did not support their claims, they found a way to force it to. This quote represents the perfect way to paraphrase what these corporate scientists' claims are all about. If the evidence doesn't support the argument that the agencies were trying to make, they would find a way to make it work. These so-called experts are also incredibly good at skewing words and messages, completely changing the original meaning. Anywhere that doubt can be created in the human mind is a prime target for the corporate hound to pounce and use this doubt to their advantage. While the tobacco industry had tried to exploit uncertainties where the science was firm, these people also insisted on certainties where the evidence was thin or entirely absent. They understood the power of language. You could undermine your opponent's claims by insisting that theirs was uncertain, while presenting your own as if they were not. You could get what you wanted if you argued with enough conviction, even if you didn't have the facts on your side. This technique was effective at creating doubt in the viewers' minds. Anyone who writes or speaks with conviction is much more believable as opposed to someone who lacks confidence. So you take a little bit of information, even wrong information, and turn it into irrefutable fact. I mean, they are scientists, right? They should be reputable. We should be able to trust them, but the truth is, we can't trust them all. This is because scientists are guided by such non-rational factors as rhetoric, propaganda, and personal prejudice. Here, specifically, the use of logos is necessary. It is important for the speaker, writer, or whomever it may be to use sources of credibility. These highly acclaimed sources will be used to gain a following and get people on board. Professional sightings act as a persuasion technique in which people are more likely to believe something with the authorization of an acclaimed scientist. The media also plays a huge role in this respect. Only the information that the media chooses to relay is what will get passed to the public. No story is told in its entirety. Not only are people getting gypped from the whole story, it is also how the story is told that creates a specific mental ideology within the listener. Agencies are hugely responsible for framing information when releasing it to the public. In most cases, a majority of the story is hidden from the public, in their best interest. But, as we've learned, there's often more to the story. This is a tactic called suppression of evidence. Also, when a scientist's findings are different than what is generally accepted by the public, controversies arise. It is the right of the people to know what is actually going on in their world. Unfortunately, large companies with big money have been able to pay scientists large sums of money to create a public image that belies reality. This type of corporate scheming is ever present in business today. Our next topic is acid rain. Acid rain is a harmful type of rain that gets into bodies of water and soil, which then harms plants and animals and the whole system. The acidity in the rain is due to emissions of sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides. In 1979, the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe committed its signatories to control any harmful emissions into the air. The convention insisted that all nations have responsibility to ensure that activities within their jurisdiction or control do not cause damage to the environment of other states or of areas beyond the limits of national jurisdiction. Henceforth, it would be illegal to dump your pollution on someone else, whether you did it with trucks or smokestacks. As Environmental Canada concluded that more than half the acid rain falling in Canada was coming from U.S. sources. When the Commission met in 1985, they decided to limit sulfur emissions by 30%. Many scientists from the U.S. and Canada met to negotiate these terms. U.S. Representative Gus Speth argued that this could all be solved by making taller smokestacks that would disperse the pollutants higher into the air. And they would come down as harmless traces. This did not directly address nor solve the problem. Instead of coming down as harmless traces, it came down as acid rain. This could have been avoided had the power companies done the right thing and controlled pollution at the source, rather than attempting to get around air quality standards by building taller smokestacks and avoiding and attacking environmentalists. One attempted argument against acid rain was, we don't know enough about acid rain to say that it's bad, or if it's even worth investing money for research and cleanup. Of course, there were still details to be worked out, but these might take 10, 20, or 50 years to resolve, and that was a long time to wait. But why should we wait to get every last detail? There was no need to wait to dot every scientific I and cross every technical T, because we had enough information to begin to act now. Even though we have known about acid rain since the early 1970s, we hadn't done anything about it until 1990 with the Clean Air Act under George W. Bush. This caused a 54% drop in sulfur dioxide levels between 1990 and 2007. In 2003, the EPA reported to Congress that the overall cost of air pollution control during the previous 10 years was between $8 billion and $9 billion, while the benefits were estimated from $101 billion to $119 billion, more than 10 times as great. Singer's billion-dollar solution to a million-dollar problem was just plain wrong. At the same time that acid rain was being politicized, another, possibly even more worrisome problem had come to light: the ozone hole. The idea that human activities might be damaging the Earth's protective ozone layer first entered the public mind in 1970, and began with the American attempt to develop a commercial airline that could fly faster than the speed of sound. The supersonic transport would fly inside the stratospheric ozone layer, and scientists worried that its emissions might do damage. While the supersonic transport did not turn out to be a serious threat, concern over it led to the realization that chemicals called chlorofluorocarbons were. During the 1970s, billions of pounds of CFCs were being produced every year for use in spray cans, air conditioners, and refrigerators. These CFCs would release large quantities of chlorine monoxide into the stratosphere, wreaking severe havoc upon the ozone and posing serious threats to human health. The revelation that mundane items like hairspray could destroy the Earth's ozone and increase cancer rates produced a media firestorm. To oppose the new research on CFCs, which might hurt the aerosol industry, the Chemical Specialties Manufacturers Association, a trade association with the aerosol industry, sent the theoretical mechanics professor Richard Scorer into the fight. Richard Scorer would begin by denouncing the work of the Climate Impact Assessment Program, a 3-year effort that involved nearly 1,000 scientists across many agencies, universities, and several other countries. How could a mechanics professor possibly understand the ozone and the effects of CFCs better than this qualified group? Regardless, he claimed that the study was pompous claptrap, that human activities were too small to have any impact on the atmosphere. Even in Los Angeles, struggling with a tremendous smog problem that created widespread respiratory distress during the summer, he insisted that humans were incapable of harming the environment. Another unscrupulous technique used by the CFC industry, as described by writer Harold Schiff, was to claim that there is no proof fluorocarbons even got into the stratosphere, no proof that they split apart to produce chlorine, no proof that, even if they did, the chlorine was destroying ozone. Each of these claims was defeated by evidence during 1975 and 1976. If environmental regulation should be based on science, then ozone is a success story. It took time to work out the complex science, but scientists, with support from the U.S. government and international scientific organization, did it. Regulations were put into place based on the science and adjusted in response to advances in it. But running in parallel to this were persistent efforts to challenge the science. Industry representatives and other skeptics doubted that ozone depletion was real, or argued that if it was real, it was inconsequential or caused by volcanoes. In 1985, ozone depletion was found over Antarctica. Probably the most notorious dismissal of this ozone depletion came from President Reagan's Secretary of the Interior, Donald Hodel,